You wake up exhausted before your day even begins. There's this heaviness in your chest, this constant pressure to manage everyone else's emotions while yours slowly suffocate. You've become the human shock absorber of your social circle, always cushioning other people's falls while bruising yourself in the process. This cycle never ends, does it? You've internalized the lie that being moral means being silent, that true goodness requires you to shrink yourself, that decent people must fade into the background to avoid causing trouble. You smile when you want to scream. You apologize when others should be thanking you. You give and give until you're hollow inside, convinced that this is what moral people do. But what if I told you this entire philosophy is designed to keep you weak? What if your goodness is actually a sophisticated form of self-destruction? How many opportunities have you lost because you were too polite to fight for them? How many relationships have you ruined by being so accommodating that you became invisible? The harsh reality is this: the world doesn't reward saints, it rewards strategists. And while you've been playing by the rules of kindergarten morality, everyone else learned the real game. If you're here, it's because something inside you is screaming that this isn't working. You've noticed that the more available you make yourself, the less valuable you become. The more you bend, the more they expect you to break. The more you sacrifice, the more they take for granted. This is where the teachings of Niccolò Machiavelli become your salvation. Machiavelli wasn't the villain history painted him as. He was the surgeon who cut through society's pretty lies to expose the bone underneath. He understood that power respects power, that strength recognizes strength, and that those who refuse to play the game get played by it. Today we're going to shatter the myth that's been suffocating you. We're going to explore why your obsession with being liked is making you unlikable, why your fear of conflict is creating more conflict, and why the very thing you think makes you good is actually making you weak. This isn't about becoming heartless. This is about becoming whole. This is about reclaiming the parts of yourself you sacrificed on the altar of other people's comfort. And yes, it's going to hurt. Truth usually does. But if you're ready to stop being the supporting character in your own life story, if you're tired of watching less qualified people pass you by because they had the audacity to demand what you were too nice to ask for, then keep watching. Because everything changes now. Still believe the world rewards good intentions? Look at your workplace, your relationships, your social circles. Who gets promoted? Who gets the girl? Who gets taken seriously when they speak? Is it the most helpful person or the most assertive one? Is it the selfless team player or the one who knows their worth and isn't afraid to communicate it? The uncomfortable truth is that we live in a world governed by perception and power, not purity. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago when he wrote The Prince. He wasn't teaching tyranny, he was teaching survival in a world where naive idealism gets you eaten alive. Here's what your parents, teachers, and society never told you. Being agreeable is not a virtue when it comes at the cost of your dignity. Being understanding is not noble when you're understanding away your own needs. Being patient is not wise when your patience enables others to waste your time. You've been taught that conflict is bad, that disagreement is rude, that standing your ground is selfish. But these teachings serve one purpose: to keep you manageable, because people who never push back never push forward. People who avoid all friction never create any progress. Meanwhile, those who learn to say no, who set clear boundaries, who present themselves as forces to be reckoned with, they command rooms. They get opportunities. They live lives of respect and influence, while you're still explaining why you deserve basic consideration. The brutal mathematics of human interaction is simple. If you don't cost anything to lose, you're worth nothing to keep. If there are no consequences for disrespecting you, disrespect becomes the norm. If you never make demands, you'll never receive what you deserve. You can spend decades being the perfect friend, employee, partner, loyal, dedicated, selfless. But the moment you're no longer useful, you'll discover how little your goodness actually mattered. Because in the end, people don't evaluate your character, they evaluate your impact. Machiavelli understood that fear and love can coexist. But if you must choose, it's better to be feared than loved by those who don't truly know you. Why? Because respect born from fear is more reliable than affection born from convenience. People may stop loving you, but they'll never stop respecting your ability to affect their world. This doesn't mean becoming a tyrant, it means becoming someone who matters, someone whose presence changes the dynamic of a room, someone whose absence is felt rather than dismissed. The nice guy finishes last not because the world is cruel, but because the nice guy never actually entered the race. He was too busy cheering everyone else on to realize he had his own lane to run. But recognizing this pattern is only the beginning. To truly break free, we need to understand where this compulsion to please comes from, and why your kindness might actually be fear wearing a disguise. If this is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button. Your transformation starts with admitting you need one. You weren't born desperate for approval. This hunger for acceptance was programmed into you through years of conditioning, reward systems, and emotional manipulation disguised as love and education. Every time you were praised for being such a good kid when you stayed quiet, every time you were rewarded for not causing trouble, every time you learned that your worth was tied to your usefulness to others, those moments built the prison you're living in now. Your people-pleasing isn't kindness, it's trauma response. It's the survival strategy you developed when you learned that love was conditional, that acceptance required performance, that being yourself wasn't enough to guarantee safety and belonging. Think about it. When was the last time you disagreed with someone without immediately softening your position? When did you last ask for something without prefacing it with apologies? When did you express anger without feeling guilty for having human emotions? You've been so thoroughly trained to prioritize other people's comfort over your own truth that you've forgotten what your authentic thoughts and feelings even sound like. You filter everything through the question, will this upset anyone? Instead of, is this right for me? This isn't empathy, it's emotional slavery. Real empathy comes from a place of strength and choice. What you're experiencing is compulsive accommodation, driven by terror of rejection, abandonment, and the unbearable thought that someone might not like you. But here's the thing about living to avoid disapproval. It's impossible. No matter how much you shrink yourself, someone will find fault. No matter how agreeable you become, someone will take advantage. No matter how selfless you are, someone will call you selfish the moment you hesitate to sacrifice yourself for their benefit. You're trying to control other people's opinions by controlling your own behavior, but opinions aren't controllable. They're unpredictable, inconsistent, and often say more about the person holding them than about you. You're exhausting yourself trying to manage something that was never yours to manage. Your desperate need to be seen as good has made you invisible. Your fear of being disliked has made you forgettable. Your obsession with being accepted has made you unworthy of genuine respect. The most tragic part? You call this love, but it's actually the opposite. True love, for others and for yourself, requires authenticity, boundaries, and the courage to disappoint people when your values demand it. What you're practicing isn't love, it's negotiation. You're bargaining with your dignity, trading pieces of your soul for temporary approval that evaporates the moment you stop paying for it. But there is a way out of this maze. There's a path between being a doormat and being a dictator, and it starts with understanding what real power looks like in human relationships. If you think your only options are to be exploited or to become an exploiter, you've been thinking too small. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in promoting cruelty. It was in recognizing that effective people understand the full spectrum of human nature and respond accordingly. The Prince teaches us that successful people are adaptable. They can be gentle when gentleness serves their goals, firm when firmness is required, and strategic about when to deploy each approach. They don't default to one mode and hope it works in every situation. Listen to this quote from Machiavelli. "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." Notice he doesn't say be cruel or heartless. He says be respected enough that people think twice before crossing you. This is the difference between power and violence. Powerful people rarely need to use force because their reputation precedes them. People who lack real power often resort to aggression as compensation. The truly influential create an aura of consequence. Others know that disrespecting them will cost something. You want to be that person who others approach with consideration, not because they hate you, but because they recognize you as someone who knows their worth, someone who has standards, someone who rewards good behavior and doesn't enable bad behavior. Here's another crucial insight from the Prince. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. Your internal goodness means nothing if your external presentation screams pushover. People respond to what they perceive, not what you intend. If you present yourself as endlessly available, infinitely patient, and eternally forgiving, you're teaching people that your time has no value, your feelings don't matter, and your boundaries are suggestions rather than requirements. Machiavelli talks about being both a fox and a lion, cunning enough to see traps and strong enough to face threats directly. Most nice guys are neither. They're sheep, hoping their innocence will protect them in a world full of wolves. The fox represents intelligence, awareness, and strategic thinking. Before you can protect yourself, you need to recognize when you're being manipulated, taken advantage of, or simply not being given the respect you deserve. The lion represents presence, backbone, and the willingness to take a stand. This doesn't mean roaring at everyone, but it means having the courage to say no, the strength to walk away, and the self-respect to enforce your own boundaries. You don't become Machiavellian by abandoning your values. You become Machiavellian by stopping the abandonment of yourself. You keep your moral core, but develop the wisdom to protect it and the strength to defend it. But maybe you're wondering, isn't there something noble about selflessness? Isn't sacrifice a virtue? Let's examine the difference between genuine kindness and the self-destructive behavior you've been calling goodness. There's a massive difference between being kind and being naive, between being generous and being exploited, between being understanding and being a fool. Most people confuse these concepts, which is why they spend their lives frustrated, resentful, and wondering why their goodness goes unrewarded. True kindness requires discernment. It involves choosing when, how, and to whom you extend yourself. It's based on wisdom, not compulsion. Kind people give because they want to, not because they're afraid of what will happen if they don't. Naive people give indiscriminately. They help people who won't help themselves, forgive people who aren't sorry, and invest in relationships with people who see them as ATMs rather than human beings. They call this virtue, but it's actually enablement of bad behavior. Generosity is sharing your abundance from a position of strength. Exploitation is giving what you can't afford to lose to people who don't appreciate the sacrifice. Generous people understand that saying no to bad investments allows them to say yes to worthy causes. Understanding means recognizing that people act according to their own psychology, history, and limitations. It doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Because you understand why someone acts that way, you can understand why a dog bites and still not let it bite you. The fundamental question you need to ask yourself is this: is your kindness making the world better or just making your life worse? Are you helping people grow or helping them avoid the consequences that might motivate them to change? When you constantly bail people out, solve their problems, and absorb their negative emotions, you're not being kind, you're being codependent. You're robbing them of opportunities to develop their own strength and resilience while depleting your own resources. Real kindness sometimes looks cruel to outsiders. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone fail, force them to face reality, or refuse to enable their self-destructive patterns. Sometimes being truly helpful means being temporarily unpopular. Machiavelli understood that effective leadership often requires making difficult decisions that serve the greater good, even when they create short-term discomfort. The same principle applies to your personal life. Sometimes you have to hurt people's feelings to help them, including yourself. The person who never says no is not helpful, they're harmful. They teach others that boundaries don't exist, that respect is optional, and that there are no consequences for selfish behavior. They create environments where the worst people thrive and the best people burn out. You've been confusing weakness with virtue for so long that developing healthy selfishness feels wrong. But selfishness isn't evil, it's essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot help others if you haven't helped yourself first. The airline safety instruction is perfect. Put your own oxygen mask on first, then assist others. This isn't selfish, it's practical. If you pass out trying to help someone else, now there are two people in trouble instead of one. So how do you make this transformation without losing your soul? How do you become powerful without becoming poisonous? How do you develop backbone without breaking your heart? First, understand that your authenticity is more valuable than your agreeability. Stop asking, "What do they want to hear?" and start asking, "What do I actually think?" Your real thoughts and feelings matter more than your imagined obligations to make everyone comfortable. Second, practice the art of strategic kindness. Be generous with people who appreciate generosity, helpful with people who use help to improve themselves, and patient with people who respect your time. Withdraw these gifts from those who take them for granted. Third, develop what I call selective availability. You don't have to be accessible to everyone all the time. Create boundaries around your time, energy, and attention. Let people earn access to your resources rather than giving them away freely. Fourth, learn to recognize and respond to disrespect immediately. Don't let small violations slide in hopes that they'll stop on their own. Address problems when they're small, or they'll grow into crisis situations that require much more dramatic responses. Fifth, stop explaining yourself so much. When you constantly justify your decisions, you're teaching people that your choices are up for debate. Sometimes the best response to "why" is "because that's what I've decided." Sixth, embrace the power of walking away. The ability to leave relationships, jobs, situations that don't serve you is one of your greatest sources of strength. People treat you better when they know you won't tolerate being treated badly. Seventh, replace your need for universal approval with a commitment to self-respect. You can't control whether everyone likes you, but you can control whether you like yourself. Focus on the opinion that matters most, your own. This transformation isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more yourself. It's about removing the layers of conditioning and people-pleasing that have been smothering your authentic nature. Machiavelli's teachings aren't about abandoning morality, they're about abandoning naivety. They're about understanding that good intentions without strategic thinking often lead to bad outcomes, that being pure of heart doesn't protect you from people who are pure of selfishness. The goal is integration, keeping your capacity for love, generosity, and compassion while developing your capacity for boundaries, discernment, and strategic thinking. You can be both kind and strong, both understanding and uncompromising, both caring and careful. But this brings us to the final, most important question. Are you ready to give up the comfort of being a victim? Are you prepared to trade the familiar pain of being overlooked for the unfamiliar challenge of being seen? Here's the moment of truth. Everything we've discussed, the analysis, the insights, the strategies, it all means nothing if you're not willing to act on it. And acting on it means giving up something you've been holding on to, the luxury of being powerless. Yes, luxury. Because there's something seductive about victimhood, something comfortable about being able to blame your problems on other people's behavior. When you're the perpetual nice guy, you never have to take full responsibility for your life because you can always point to how unfairly you've been treated. But that comfort comes at a devastating cost. Your agency, your growth, your self-respect, and your actual ability to create the life you want. When you step into your power, you lose your excuses. You can no longer blame others for taking advantage of you because you've learned to protect yourself. You can no longer complain about being ignored because you've learned to command attention. You can no longer whine about being undervalued because you've learned to communicate and enforce your worth. This is terrifying for people who have built their identity around being the harmless victim of circumstances. Becoming powerful means becoming accountable. It means admitting that you've been participating in your own oppression, that you've been enabling the very behaviors you claim to hate. So I'm going to ask you directly, when was the last time you chose your own needs over someone else's wants? When did you last say exactly what you meant without softening it for someone else's comfort? When did you last feel proud of yourself for standing your ground instead of ashamed for causing inconvenience? Here's what I want you to do right now. Think of one person in your life who consistently takes more than they give, who treats your kindness as weakness, who seems to respect everyone except you. Got someone in mind? Now imagine what would happen if you started treating them the way they treat you, not out of malice, but out of reciprocity. What would happen if you became as unavailable to them as they are to you? What would happen if you demanded the same consideration you automatically provide? I'll tell you what would happen. They'd either start treating you with respect, or they'd reveal their true nature by becoming angry at your refusal to be exploited. Either way, you win. Either you get a better relationship, or you get clear information about who you're dealing with. The people who truly care about you will support your growth into a stronger, more self-respecting person. The people who benefited from your weakness will resist this change. Their resistance is your confirmation that the change is necessary. You have a choice to make right now. You can close this video, feel inspired for a few hours, and then go back to your old patterns. Or you can decide that today is the day you stop negotiating with your own dignity. The world is waiting for you to show up as yourself, not the diminished version you think people want, but the full, powerful, authentic version that has something real to contribute. But that person will only emerge when you stop apologizing for existing and start insisting on being treated like you matter. Tell me in the comments, what's the one boundary you've been afraid to set? What's the one conversation you've been avoiding because you're afraid of conflict? Share it below, because naming it is the first step to claiming it. The journey from victim to victor starts with a single decision, the decision to stop accepting unacceptable behavior, starting with your own. Your life is calling. Are you going to answer, or are you going to keep letting it go to voicemail?